Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our honored guest, the Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, members of the United States House of Representatives, members of the United States Senate, and the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Ladies and gentlemen, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable John Boehner.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Capitol Rotunda. Since the days of the American Revolution, Congress has commissioned gold medals to express appreciation for distinguished achievements and contributions to our country. The first recipient of a gold medal was General George Washington. And today, pursuant to Public Law 11144, we will present a gold medal on behalf of the United States Congress to the Honorable John Glenn, first American to orbit the Earth; Neil Armstrong, the first human to walk on the moon; Michael Collins, the pilot of Apollo 11's command module; and Dr. Buzz Aldrin, pilot of Apollo's lunar module and the second human being to walk on the moon. We are honored to be joined by a number of distinguished public servants and members of the NASA community, including the most recent astronaut class, which graduated not long ago. Also with us are members of the crew of the USS Hornet, the carrier that recovered the Apollo 11 astronauts when they splashed down in the Pacific. And before we have the presentation of colors, let me draw your attention to the flag here on stage. It was a tradition for returning astronauts to appear before a joint meeting of the Congress. Senator Glenn did so on February 26, 1962. On September 16, 1969, the crew of Apollo 11 presented Speaker John McCormick with a flag that they carried to the moon. Today, the flag is under the care of the House Sergeant of Arms, Bill Livingood. And as some of you know, Bill has had a great affection for the flag. And I'm told that he's even held birthday parties for it. We appreciate his willingness to part with it for just today.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the presentation of the colors by the United States Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and the retiring of the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing as the chaplain of the United States House of Representatives, the Reverend Patrick Conroy, gives the invocation.
Let us pray. God of the universe, we give you thanks for the wonder of your creation. A long time ago, in a place far, far away, you called forth a common ancestor of faith to leave his home, to travel to a place you would show him. By that call, and by his obedience to and trust in you, we continue to be challenged to move beyond the limits of our own imaginations. On this day, we gather to give you thanks that we are wondrously made and gifted with the spirit and the will to move beyond the horizon. All of our ancestors at some point left a place familiar to them into an uncertain future. But that future to them has become our present. We give you thanks for the dreams and hopes of this nation's ancestors, and today for the personal heroism that empowered those being honored today to leave this very planet familiar to them, to go to a universe never before visited by our kind. The many advances of science in technology, medicine, and physics, to name only three, have bettered the lives of millions. The advances in the spirit of our human family, perhaps more importantly, have been immeasurable. Bless these most heroic Americans we honor this day. May they know of our shared pride and our most grateful esteem for them. And may all those whose shared efforts and ingenuity allowed these honored ones to boldly go where no one has gone before know of our gratitude as well. Where can we go from your Spirit, O God? Where can we flee from your presence? If we go up to the heavens, you are there. Thank you for that. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the ranking member of the United States House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and the representative from the 30th District of Texas, the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to permit me to make a few remarks as we honor distinguished Americans. You know, hero is an overused word, but I think that all who are assembled today would not hesitate to describe our honorees as genuine national heroes. In fact, the only ones who might object to that description are our honorees themselves. In an age of inflated egos and self-promotion, each of these gentlemen has distinguished himself in his modesty, his competence, his bravery, and his dedication to serving this nation. While we ostensibly are honoring them by bestowing gold medals today, in truth, it is no less than a simple recognition of all they have meant to America. As I said to Mr. Armstrong when he testified before our committee earlier this year, America's space program is as much about inspiration as it is about rockets and space capsules. And the four gentlemen we are honoring today are continuing to inspire our young and old. Even though our path-breaking missions occurred more than 4 decades ago. They led to the way as America ventured into this new ocean of space, as President Kennedy described it. And by the time they completed their work, America was preeminent in space exploration. It is our challenge and our duty to do all we can in these challenging fiscal times to keep that preeminence in space, because doing so will inspire our young people, strengthen our economy, create the jobs of the future, and benefit our society in countless ways. That will be the best way to truly honor the legacy of 4 heroes who stand with us today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the United States House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space and Technology, and the representative from the 4th District of Texas, the Honorable Ralph Hall.
First, Mr. Speaker, let me thank you for scheduling today's Congressional Medal Ceremony honoring these brave men. Our school children and others will be reading about them for hundreds of years. They hardly need any introduction. All Americans, young and old, take great pride in our nation's manned space program flight and the men and women who had flown as astronauts, the engineers, the scientists, the technicians who provided the U.S. with the technologies that enable safe travel into space. Walk up to virtually anyone in the street and they'll be able to tell you the names of our first president. They can tell you who our current president is, the first American to orbit the Earth, and the first Americans to land on the moon, a very select group. 2009 marked the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, and next February 12, 2012, marks the 50th anniversary of John Glenn's historic ride into the space on board Friendship 7. Both of these missions are remarkable for the bravery, if not the audacity, of those astronauts to fly spacecraft of the first-of-a-kind missions. John Glenn's flight in the Mercury capsule was the first U.S. orbital manned mission. Apollo 11 was the first to land men on the moon and return, and in both cases, their missions were the first to fully exercise the many systems and components that made up their rockets and their capsules. The degree of difficulty was high. The risk of failure arguably was still higher, and yet these men were willing to embrace that peril. One of these men, John being the first, as I've stated, was also the only of this group to run for president. I have been allotted 4 minutes. I'm taking a minute out to tell one of the great stories that came out of that campaign. John may not want me to tell it, but he was running for president. He came home an hour late for a dinner that his lovely wife, Annie, had prepared. She was a little irritated that he was late. At that time, John was worn out. He was tired. His dog was welcoming him and licking his hand and moaning, and John was petting him, and she was on his case. And finally he said, "Annie, I'm dead tired. I'm not doing good in the polls. I'm almost out of money. When I come home like this, seems like I ought to have at least 2 friends." So she bought him another dog. It also bears mentioning that much of the hardware on our early generation space systems, including Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, were designed not with components, but with slide rules. And the computers on board the Mercury, Gemini, and the Apollo capsules were very rudimentary by today's standards. Several weeks ago in a hearing before the House Science Committee, Neil Armstrong made this point by holding up his cell phone and testifying that it had far more capability than the computer that guided the Apollo 11 capsule. It's impossible to fully grasp the discoveries and technologies that have sprung from our nation's space flight program and the innovations and products they spawn. So too, it's challenging to measure the effect our space program has had on America's place in the community of nations and on our international prestige. But I can tell you that we wouldn't be discussing these outcomes today were it not for John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Mike Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, and their wives and families whose support and sacrifices enabled the success of these missions. Congratulations to all of you. Your exploits have become integral to our nation's history and its success, and for that, I sincerely thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the United States Senate's Subcommittee on Science and Space and the Senior Senator from the state of Florida, the Honorable Bill Nelson.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's said in the Psalms, written by David as he peered up into the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament showeth his handiwork. These adventurers have touched the firmament. You think of the significance of this Congressional Gold Medal. It has only been awarded to 100. And of those in aviation and space first, think of the Wright brothers, Charles Lindbergh, Dr. Robert Goddard, the father of modern rocketry, and now today's honorees. And I dare say that in future years, we will be giving this same ceremony and gold medal to the first crew that will land on the planet Mars. Ladies and gentlemen, the dream is alive. As a matter of fact, it's a part of us. It's our character as the American people to be adventurers and explorers. And we won't ever give that dream up. Indeed, in the honoring of these astronauts, we foretell the future, the greatness, the discovery, the expressing of ourselves as a people, pioneers, adventurers, and explorers. Ladies and gentlemen, the dream is alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ranking member of the United States Senate's Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation, and the senior senator from the state of Texas, the Honorable Kay Bailey Hutchison.
We are honoring 4 brave, determined, resilient men. They and the astronauts who followed took enormous personal risks for our country to venture beyond Earth's orbit. Their missions into the unknown remind us of what can be achieved, as well as the dangers of not reaching for the stars. America urgently needs to continue our preeminence in manned space exploration. From Senator Glenn's flight on Friendship 7 to astronauts Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin's lunar mission of Apollo 11, to our recent space shuttle program to the space station, we know that space exploration is a step-by-step process. It will require leadership to get a sustained commitment of resources and a clear sense of purpose over time. Look at what space exploration has brought to America. The technology and products in space science, earth science, fundamental aeronautics research, and education have spurred tens of billions of economic activity dollars and hundreds of thousands of productive jobs. The use of satellites that can guide a missile into a window from 3 miles away has drastically lowered collateral damage and saved countless lives in conflicts and wars. We have all heard the words of President John Kennedy when he spoke in 1962 at Rice University. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon and to the planets beyond, and we have vowed that we shall not see it governed by a hostile flag of conquest, but by a banner of freedom and peace. The President set America on the course to achieve his vision. The men here today soared into a dark sky and described from afar what they saw. In the process, they contributed to a better world here on earth. They assured America would lead the way. We owe it to them and to our nation not to abdicate our nation's role as the leader in space exploration. What they began, we are summoned to continue. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Mr. Charles Bolden, Jr.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Reed, Mr. McConnell, Ms. Pelosi, members of Congress, and honored guests, as we embark upon a next chapter of human space exploration, we stand on the shoulders of the extraordinary men we recognize here today. Those of us who have had the privilege to fly in space followed the trail they forged. America's leadership in space and the confidence that we can go farther into the unknown and achieve great things as a people rests on the achievements of these men. When 50 years ago this year, President Kennedy challenged the nation to reach the moon, to take longer strides toward a great new American enterprise, these men were the human face of these words. From Mercury and Gemini, on through our landings on the moon and the Apollo program, their actions unfolded the will of a nation for the greater achievement of humankind. Today, another young president has challenged us to reach for new heights and plan an ambitious mission to Mars. Just as we called on the 4 individuals we honor today to carry out our early achievements in space, we now call on a new generation of explorers to go where we have never gone before. As we honor these heroes, I want to recognize the hundreds and thousands of dedicated NASA employees and industry partners who contributed to the incredible success of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs and all that has followed, and all that is yet to come. I also want to thank Congress. Our nation is a better place because of more than a half-century of strong, bipartisan support for NASA's work in human exploration, science, and aeronautics. 5 members of the most recent astronaut candidate class of 2009 are with us today to pay tribute to the Congressional Gold Medal honorees and build on their accomplishments to make similar, lasting contributions to our nation's space program. This new group of astronauts stands on the shoulders of the giants we recognize and honor here today, and they will redefine space exploration in the years to come and continue to honor the legacy of John, Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. It's a lasting legacy, a legacy that continues to unfold and transform our modern world. The inspiration these 4 have provided to generations isn't something we can measure, but we can feel in our hearts. As a nation, we would not be the same without them and their bravery, their sense of duty and dedication to public service, and their great skill at thinking on their feet. They changed the course of history and helped our nation to achieve the bigger things to which our greater nature aspires. We owe them our humblest gratitude. On behalf of NASA and all the astronauts past and present, I congratulate and thank each of you, John, Neil, Buzz, and Mike, our Congressional Gold Medal recipients today.
Ladies and gentlemen, the singer-songwriter Norah Jones will now sing America the Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful for space. spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for halcyon skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the enameled plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till souls wax fair as earth and air, till music hearted see, till souls wax fair as earth and air, and music hearted see.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Leader of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
Good morning. Today's ceremony is a celebration of imagination and creativity. It is a tribute to America's leadership, to our legacy of exploration, our belief in discovery, our pursuit of scientific excellence and technological achievement. Today, we honor 4 courageous Americans who represented and do still the highest hopes of a generation, who inspired our nation to new heights of greatness and knowledge, who ignited the fires of innovation and rekindled the flames of scientific progress. We honor 4 men who embody the optimism, the energy, the spirit of the new frontier. As President John F. Kennedy said more than a half-century ago, the new frontier is not a set of promises, it is a set of challenges. And these astronauts not only accepted those challenges, they challenged future generations to explore new horizons, to apply our skills, our effort, our determination to any obstacles before us. Indeed, when President Kennedy announced his determination to chart a new course into space, all Americans, and those of you who, well, many of you may not have been born then, but for many of us who were there, learned a new word, astronaut, sailors to the stars, a sailor to the stars. In the past age of discovery, the sailors were guided by the stars. In the new age of discovery, the new frontier, these astronauts reached for the stars. As Senator John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, he paved the way not simply for more missions into space, but for an expanded commitment to science and technology. And he acted upon that commitment with his leadership in the United States Senate, where he brought honor to the Congress, and as he and the other recipients of the award today bring honor to this medal. Michael Collins piloted the command module Columbia as part of Apollo 11. On the 40th anniversary of that achievement, he recalled how he peered out the ship's windows at the surface of the moon and saw the potential for students interested in science, math, and engineering. As Neil Armstrong took one giant leap for mankind, Americans knew we could overcome any obstacle and prevail over any challenge. As Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon, an entire nation saw a promise fulfilled and a challenge met. These men personified President Kennedy's call to the students of Rice University in the address that launched the moonshot when he said, "The vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we are first, and therefore we intend to be first. Our leadership in science and in industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort." Those of us, again, who remember the President's statement thought it was unimaginable that we could send a man to the moon and back safely within 10 years. But these astronauts knew it was possible. They ensured that we were first to set foot on the moon, first in science and technology and the industries of innovation, first in the pursuit of peace and partnership, in search of security for our country and around the world. And we still must be first today. We must sustain the spirit of those flights when Americans no longer feel bound by the limits of the past, but inspired by the possibilities of the present and the frontiers of the future. In that same address at Rice University, which Senator Hutchinson referenced as well, President Kennedy reminded us the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who moved forward, and so will space. End of quote. Senator John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, these astronauts of the new frontier did not wait or rest or wish. They did not look back or behind. They moved forward, and our country moved forward with them into space, into new generations of exploration, and into a new frontier of discovery, progress, and hope for our future. For their spirit, for their actions, for their inspiration in this time of Thanksgiving season, we thank them, we honor them, we congratulate them for receiving the highest civilian honor this country can bestow, the Congressional Gold Medal. Congratulations to our leaders. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican leader of the United States Senate, the Honorable Mitch McConnell.
In early 1959, about 6 months after Congress formally created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, a group of test pilots was summoned to a top-secret briefing at the Pentagon. Once there, they were told that NASA was developing a program aimed at putting a man in orbit and that it needed volunteers. The training would be long, dangerous, and unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. And those who were chosen would be called astronauts. A 37-year-old Marine and father of two named John Glenn was among those who attended that meeting. He volunteered without hesitation. And 3 Februaries later, Glenn found himself circling the Earth from the heavens at 17,500 miles an hour, staring at the sunset that was even more spectacular than he ever imagined as the nation looked on. In New York, thousands of commuters stood still in Grand Central Station to watch the takeoff. And even Walter Cronkite allowed himself a little show of national pride from the broadcaster's chair. As Glenn's rocket lifted from the Earth, Cronkite rooted for the home team, saying, "Go
baby, go. The context of all this was important. 5 years earlier, the Soviet Union had beaten us into space with an unmanned satellite, an achievement that prompted Nikita Khrushchev to quip that now the U.S. sleeps under a Soviet moon. And that's where the other three men we honor today come in. 7 years after Glenn circled the Earth, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins put to rest any doubts about the position of the United States in the world. The Cold War was now being fought in space, and these men proved that the U.S. was winning. It wasn't easy. As President Eisenhower had stated at the outset, America's space program would be civilian rather than military-led, so no one would doubt our intentions. But this also meant that it would be conducted in the open, so every hitch and holdup could be seen and scrutinized. And this is just as it should have been. These missions, spanning 2 Democratic and 2 Republican administrations, showed not only the power of the 4 men we honor today, they showed the power of the collective efforts of a nation united in a common purpose. It took vision, it took will, it took leadership, it took guts. And it took the remarkable courage of John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Now, they'll tell you they're not heroes. Don't listen to them. America is only as strong as the citizens we produce, and here are 4 of the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, the Honorable Harry Reid.
A couple of points of personal privilege. First of all, Nora Jones, I'm one of your big fans, and it's such a pleasure to be able to listen to you in such close proximity with your beautiful voice and your wonderful presentation. Secondly, I've been so impressed with what this man has done in space and what he's done on Earth. Could we all give a round of applause to Mark Kelly? Mark, you could at least stand so we could all see you. It's been a pleasure over the years to meet Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. But I'm going to spend some time today talking about someone I not only met but had the good fortune of serving with in the United States Senate, John Glenn. Barbara Mikulski is here, and she will remember, as I have, as a couple of new, young senators, that we were going on a congressional delegation trip led by John Glenn and Ted Stevens. It was a wonderful trip. So to be with these 2 fine senators, I was so happy that I could go. I can remember many things about that trip, and I'll talk just about a couple of things. We left Vienna to go to Czechoslovakia, as it was called at that time. And when we came to that border, the Iron Curtain was still down, and they stopped our train. They brought out the dogs and all the security people with their rifles. And they were looking around and under the train, and we were asked to get out of the train. As things calmed down a little bit, one of the soldiers, looking around so no one would see what he was doing, came over to John Glenn quickly and said, "Could you give me an autograph?" We then went to Prague, and we had a meeting with some government officials there. As we were walking up the street, someone came out of an apartment building with an encyclopedia and had it open to John Glenn's picture and came to him and said, would you autograph over your picture? We focus on how important these astronauts are to us here in the United States, but keep in mind how important they have been to people all around the world. A Soviet soldier on a train going into Czechoslovakia, a person of minimal status, I guess we would say, in Prague, who wanted to be able to look at John Glenn and say, I have this picture, would you sign it for me? But John Glenn's prowess has been more than just this trip to Czechoslovakia and the other places we went. I've been so impressed with who he is and what he's done, his personal life, but also one story I have to tell because it's one of my favorite of all time. We had some people come to visit me. My office was at that time in the Hart Building, and they were people, young teenagers from Nevada, who had been in the double Dutch jump roping championship nationwide. And so they were in one of the hallways there of the Hart Building, the big, wide, spacious area, and they were jumping. There's two ropes going at the same time, and these kids looked so great jumping in and out of that rope. But they said, try it. To me, and I tried it, and I made a small fool of myself. But I didn't realize this, but John Glenn had been watching these kids do the double Dutch jump roping. And he came over. He was just a kid then. He was probably only about 75. He came over and he said, do you mind if I try this? He was just like one of the teenagers, double Dutch jump roping. So I have so many fond memories of John Glenn and the role model that he has been for me as a senator. Sometimes it seems that the more we learn about the great reaches of the heavens, the more we have left to learn. So much left to learn. But space travel has taught us as much about the planet we call home as it has about the mystery that lies beyond. And for that we have these four pioneers to thank. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable John Boehner.
Well, I think I'm just going to go ahead and say what I think everybody here is thinking. This is pretty cool. When the Prime Minister of Australia addressed the Congress last March, she said that as a little girl, watching the men land on the moon proved to her that Americans could do anything. She grew up in Adelaide, a city that's east of Perth, whose residents turned all their lights on to greet John Glenn the night that he flew back across Australia. You know, the world looks to America because we are free, and it's to our values to which people aspire. One of those values is humility, the idea that you're part of a cause greater than yourself, that nothing in life is a do-it-yourself project. Though an often unsung virtue, humility figured prominently in the pinnacle of human achievement. To this day, John Glenn insists he was no hero, just a patriot serving his country, which in those days was gripped by the notion that America and democracy itself had fallen behind. Now, these were daring missions, but they were vital missions as well. Neil Armstrong was once asked, why did you, this one man, choose to speak for all when you set your foot on the lunar surface. As it turns out, there was no script, and there were no notes. When the moment came, Neil's thoughts turned to the 400,000 people who worked on the project, the designers, the testers, the engineers, the navigators, all who devised that one small step. He said, and I quote, that he knew it would be a big something for all those folks and a lot of others who weren't even involved in the project. And so it was. Buzz Aldrin, far from being caught up in adrenaline, paused to reflect. He took out a wafer, a thimble of wine, and observed communion on the moon, just as Columbus had done when he reached the New World. Buzz invited everyone to give thanks in his or her own way, and when Neil and Buzz planted the stars and stripes on the moon, there was one person who couldn't observe the scene live. That's all right, I don't mind, said Michael Collins from Apollo 11's command module. His attention focused on making sure that pioneers would get home. 2 years ago, Mike said this, heroes abound, but don't count astronauts among them. We worked very hard, we did our jobs to near perfection, but that's what we've been hired to do. When Americans take on our work with humility and dedication, there truly is nothing that we can't accomplish. We can do anything if we humble ourselves and if we've got the right stuff. Gentlemen, heroes or not, your acts were heroic. And today we add you to the many honors, to your many honors, with respect and gratitude, the Congressional Gold Medal.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for the unveiling and presentation of the Congressional Gold Medals by members of the United States Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, the first person to land a spacecraft upon the moon and the first person to set foot upon its surface, Mr. Neil Armstrong.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Reed, Mr. McConnell, Ms. Pelosi, members, distinguished guests. We gather in this remarkable monument to American history. This room connecting the houses of Congress, this room where ideological differences fade in the presence of the overpowering force of pride in what we do and what Americans have achieved. It's a privilege to be in this rotunda. High above us, just below the windows, stretches a frieze with 19 panels depicting important events in American history. The most recent of them, number 19, just above me here, depicts the first successful flight of a man in a powered aircraft by the brothers Wright 108 years ago. The depiction, in addition to the craft and the responsible individuals, includes an American bald eagle carrying an olive branch. Wilbur and Orville Wright were the 45th recipients of the Congressional Gold Medal and the first for achievements in the world of flight. Subsequently, Congressional Gold Medals have been presented 9 times for aviation and rocketry achievements. Today, for the first time, they are being given for achievements in spaceflight. In an appropriate coincidence, Apollo 11's mission emblem and crew patch also featured an American bald eagle carrying an olive branch. The Apollo 11 crew is honored to receive the Congressional Gold Medal and accept, on behalf of our fellow Apollo teammates, all those who played a role in expanding the human presence outward from Earth, and all those who played a role in expanding human knowledge of the solar system and beyond. We thank the Congress very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the former United States Senator from the state of Ohio and the first American to orbit the Earth, the Honorable John Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Leaders of the House and Senate, members of Congress, ladies and gentlemen, first, thanks to each of you for being here today to share this very, very special occasion with us. From our founding days, Americans have been motivated by curiosity about the new and the unknown, whether it was geographical exploration that pushed back the frontiers of a continent, or micro-exploration in our laboratories. That curiosity and research, coupled with an education system that let all our citizens benefit and contribute, were the twin engines of progress that catapulted America into world preeminence. But there were other frontiers never before believed to be approachable. And for many, many thousands of years, people had looked up and wondered, they'd been curious about what was up there.
Now, we must consider ourselves among the most fortunate of all generations, for we have lived at a time when the dream became a reality, when we finally could travel above the atmosphere around the Earth, where we could establish laboratories in space and do research, and for the very first time in history, leave human footprints on some place other than Earth, as Neil and Buzz and Mike made their epic journey. The message they left on the lunar surface could be said of all our manned space travels. We came in peace for all mankind. These dreams were brought to life by one of the most dedicated and capable teams ever put together. Workers, technicians, engineers, scientists. Honored as we are today, we certainly share this recognition with that great team. Almost 50 years ago, following the orbital flight of Friendship 7, I was very privileged to address a joint session of Congress. And I closed my remarks then with words I will repeat today. As our knowledge of the universe in which we live increases, may God grant us the wisdom and guidance to use it wisely. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing as the chaplain of the United States Senate, Dr. Barry Black, gives the benediction.
Let us pray. O Lord of hosts, you stretched out the heavens like a curtain. Thank you for this opportunity to honor 4 pioneers. Lord, you empowered them to enter a new frontier, slipping the surly bonds of earth to reach out and touch your sovereign face. May the inspiration we receive from these well-lived lives save us from the love of ease, which chooses the comfortable way, and from the procrastination which puts things off until it's too late. Bless and keep us in all of our tomorrows, in our going out and coming in our rising up and lying down, from this time forth, even forevermore. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats for the departure of the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Thank you and have a nice day. Okay.
Oh, I did lose a button.
Sure they